Greetings, dear listeners. How are you today, and where are you watching from? In today's video, we will explore an ancient and eternal question. Why does the world exist instead of emptiness? But what if emptiness is not truly empty? What if behind the darkness we call nothing hides a secret source from which everything is born? This story unveils the mystery of why there is a world and not eternal void. Allow me to invite you. Listen now to how it all began. Since the earliest times, humanity has turned its gaze to the endless sky and asked the same question. Where does all this come from? The stars, like countless sparks in the night, silently reminded of a mystery that had no answer. The world seemed like a vast theater, but no one saw the playwright, and no one heard his words. Yet it was precisely this silence that became the first impulse for the search for meaning. Philosophers, mystics, poets, and ordinary people tried to penetrate the depth of this enigma. After all, would it not be more natural if nothing existed? Emptiness means absence, silence, stillness, where there is neither suffering nor joy. But despite all logic, we live in a world of forms, colors, breaths, and movements. Why is it so? Why does anything exist at all? Allow yourself to notice. This question is not a dry abstraction. It touches every breath, every glance, every thought. If true emptiness reigned, there would be no one to ask the question. The very fact of our existence is already a hint that emptiness was never the final truth. Many ancient cultures considered this mystery in different ways. Some saw it as the play of divine forces, others as the manifestation of an invisible law. In myths and legends, emptiness never remained emptiness for long. It became chaos, and then cosmos, an ordered harmony. This suggested that nothingness was not an end, but a beginning. Try to hear the silence between words. In that pause, in that invisible space between inhalation and exhalation, life already hides. In this way, ancient thinkers tried to explain. The world did not simply appear, it was inevitable, because even emptiness itself contains the potential for birth. The eternal question is not why there are trees, mountains, or stars. It is why there is the very possibility of existence. Where did the stage come from on which everything unfolds? This question has no final answer in the usual sense, yet it opens a doorway to reflection, meditation, and inner experience. And everyone who has ever looked into the silence of the night has felt that the answer is closer than it seems, not in words, not in theories, but in the very fact of presence. When the mind turns to the origins of creation, before the inner eye arises the image of chaos. It is not merely disorder or destruction, but a primal reality where no distinctions or boundaries exist. Ancient peoples described chaos as a boundless ocean, where neither sky nor earth nor time yet appeared. It was a deep potentiality, in which everything already hid, but nothing yet had form. Allow yourself to notice. Chaos was not perceived as a threat. Rather, it was like dark soil before the first sprouts. Invisible and silent, it still carried within it the seeds of future order. And for this reason, myths across cultures agreed on one thing. From chaos comes cosmos, and from the abyss emerges harmony. In Sumerian tales, we hear of the primeval waters, where the breath of the future world rested. In Greek tradition, chaos became the source from which gods, sky, and earth were born. In the ancient Indian hymns, chaos appears not as emptiness, but as a state where the sounds of future mantras slept. Each of these visions affirmed, the absence of order is never final. It always holds within itself the possibility of awakening. Cosmos in this sense is not only the physical universe filled with stars and planets. Cosmos is a symbol of order, meaning, and connection. When cosmos arose from chaos, humanity understood. Even darkness carries the promise of light. Even within the deepest uncertainty lies the possibility of harmony. Try to hear. In every breath, there is also a small model of this transformation. Inhalation begins as chaos, a flow of air belonging to nothing. But in the lungs, it becomes the source of life, giving strength for movement and awareness. So too, on a cosmic scale, chaos absorbs the future structure and then unfolds into ordered being. This ancient picture resonates remarkably with modern theories. Scientists describe the early universe as a chaotic explosion of energy, where no stars or atoms yet existed. And only after moments measured in eternity did laws emerge, through which galaxies were born. This was the transformation of boundless chaos into the cosmos we behold today. And so the old myths remain alive. They remind us, emptiness and chaos are not an end, but a threshold. They point to the truth that beyond apparent darkness, a new order always stirs. In this passage from chaos to cosmos, the mystery first opens: why the world exists instead of nothing. When humanity tried to explain the mystery of existence, it turned to religion. Religious revelations became maps that guided the soul through the incomprehensible. In sacred texts, we find many depictions of the world's beginning. Each speaks in its own way, yet all affirm, non-being never held power over eternity. In the biblical tradition, we read, "In the beginning was the Word." This image is simple and majestic. A single word, spoken outside of time, became the source of all. The word here is not mere sound, but the energy of meaning, which created light and life. For believers, this means the world is not random. It was born of intention and filled with significance. In other cultures, we encounter another metaphor. In the teachings of India, the breath of Brahma is described, how the universe is born and dissolves with his inhalations and exhalations. Here, the world is understood as rhythm, as eternal cycle, where emptiness is never final. It is only a pause, necessary for the next breath. Buddhist tradition adds another emphasis. It teaches, within emptiness lies nirvana, a space where no divisions exist. But this is not cold emptiness. It is radiant presence from which compassion arises. That is why Buddhists meditate on emptiness, to feel that non-being is not an end but the source of awakening. Allow yourself to notice. In all these teachings, emptiness becomes a gate, not a wall. It is a boundary beyond which life already waits. One could say differently, nothingness cannot hold back the force that longs to manifest. Even if all disappears, breath, word, or light remain, as a sign that existence is inevitable. These religious revelations do not contradict each other. They weave into a single choir, each tradition singing its own note. Some speak of the word, some of the breath, some of the inner silence. But all affirm one truth. The world exists because being is stronger than emptiness. Try to hear this idea as an inner mantra. When everything seems to collapse and darkness arrives, at that moment, the unseen word resounds. At that moment, breath reminds us of itself. At that moment, silence becomes luminous. And in those instants we understand, emptiness is never final. While religious teachings offered their answers, beside them always lived secret schools. These esoteric traditions spoke of emptiness differently, as a living source hidden beyond ordinary perception. For them, nothingness was not an end, but a gate leading to new understanding. In mystical writings, emptiness was described not as dead darkness, but as a space saturated with energy. Where ordinary eyes saw only absence, the esoteric masters affirmed presence, invisible yet powerful. They said, within silence lies the root of all sounds. Within darkness rests the seed of light. Allow yourself to notice, for esoteric schools, emptiness was potential. Within it, everything possible rested, awaiting its moment of manifestation. It resembled a seed in the soil. It may appear lifeless, yet within it, life already stirs. So emptiness was not a void of non-being, but a maternal womb holding the beginning. The Hermetic teaching declared, "That which is below is like that which is above." This formula spoke of the connection between the visible world and the unseen. In the emptiness hidden from the eyes lies the reflection of the cosmos. By understanding the hidden, one could also understand the revealed. Therefore, esoteric seekers looked not to the noise of the outer world, but to the silence of inner contemplation. Kabbalistic texts taught of Ein, that which precedes being. Ein is not absence, but a state without form, from which the light of Ein Sof emerges. Emptiness in this tradition is the primordial field from which infinity overflows. Thus, nothingness became the doorway into the infinite all. Try to hear this paradox with your heart. Where the mind seeks boundaries, esoteric vision finds transition. For them, emptiness is not a hollow shell, but a depth where every possibility lives. It is like the silence before music, the pause where the first chord already prepares to sound. These secret teachings urged not to fear emptiness, but to enter it with trust. For it is precisely there that a new vision is born, precisely there that the force awakens which turns nothingness into being. And so the esoteric traditions taught, to understand the world, one must look into the depth of what seems empty. Philosophers who reflected on existence always returned to a strange paradox. What we call nothing cannot exist in its pure form. Even the thought of emptiness already fills it with content. The very word nothing points to something, to an idea we are able to hold. Thus, absolute absence simply does not exist. Allow yourself to notice. Great thinkers spoke of this in different ways, yet they agreed on one point. For Parmenides, there was only being, while non-being was illusion. For Aristotle, emptiness could not exist in nature, because within it no movement could occur. And modern philosophers emphasized that negation itself is also a form of affirmation. All of this led to one conclusion. We live not despite emptiness, but because emptiness in the pure sense does not exist. These reflections can be compared to a hall of mirrors. It seems we gaze into emptiness, but in truth, we see reflections of reflections. Every nothing is only another image of something hidden behind words. Philosophy thus reveals that the question, why is there something rather than nothing, carries within it a contradiction. Try to feel this not with the mind, but with the heart. Each time we say nothing exists, we already affirm the presence of consciousness capable of saying it. In that moment, emptiness ceases to be empty. It becomes the background upon which the act of presence appears. Some thinkers claim that the very question of nothingness is a reflection of human fear. We fear non-being, so we give it a name. Yet when we look closely into this fear, it dissolves. What opens instead of dead emptiness is a space of possibilities. The philosophical view teaches us to see in emptiness not a threat, but a paradox. It cannot exist by itself. Even if we imagine it, imagination already is presence. Even if we say that nothing is, this nothing becomes something. Thus being is not an exception, but a necessity. This realization changes perception. It transforms emptiness from a frightening shadow into the ground of presence. Then it becomes clear. The world exists because absolute nothingness is only an illusion. It is like a horizon we approach, yet which always remains ahead. While philosophy spoke to the mind, spiritual practice spoke to experience. Mantras and meditation became keys that allowed one to peer into the very depth of silence. For practitioners, emptiness ceased to be a frightening idea. It turned into a space filled with breath and light, something one could feel here and now. A mantra, spoken aloud or within, works as vibration. Its sound cuts through the usual noise of the mind and reminds, even in apparent emptiness, there is always presence. When the syllable Om fills the inner space, it creates the sense of the root of all being. This is not magic in the ordinary sense, but a subtle tuning of consciousness, aligning one with the rhythm of the universe. Allow yourself to notice. Meditation shows that emptiness is not absence, but fullness. With closed eyes, one looks into darkness. At first it seems that nothing is there, yet with each passing minute, silence becomes alive. There arises a sense that emptiness itself breathes. It responds to attention, like an ocean where every wave is ready to reveal hidden strength. Buddhist masters taught, one should not fight emptiness but accept it. In practice, silence reveals itself as infinite presence. There are no forms or images, yet there is the feeling that all is connected and one. Meditation reminds us, the non-being we fear is in truth a radiant source where compassion and clarity are born. Try to hear. Between inhalation and exhalation lies a moment. It resembles a tiny pause where all disappears. But if one listens closely, life hides there. This brief stillness of breath recalls the ancient truth. Emptiness is never final. It always prepares to open into a new breath, a new beginning. The practice of mantras and meditation makes the mystery of existence personal. It ceases to be an abstract question and becomes an inner experience. Each sound of mantra, each minute of silence teaches, the world exists because at the heart of stillness there is always movement. And then the question, why is there something rather than nothing, receives an unexpected answer. It does not arrive as theory, but unfolds as experience. When we think of darkness, it is often associated with fear and the unknown. Yet, in mystical traditions, darkness is understood differently, as a gate leading to new light. It is not empty or cold, but filled with hidden power. From the depths of darkness arise the first glimmers of morning radiance. Allow yourself to notice. Night has never been seen as an ending. It has always been a passage. In the silence of night, the earth rests, seeds gather strength, and the soul seeks balance. Without darkness, light would be impossible. That is why many mystical teachings called night the mother of day and shadow the guardian of light. Remember how a star is born from cosmic darkness. For billions of years, invisible matter gathers into a single knot until flame ignites. So it is in life. What seems like darkness is often preparation for revelation. Darkness does not hinder light. It nourishes it. Esoteric schools taught, one should not fear darkness. It is like a cave where a hidden spring flows. Only by entering can one hear its murmur. The same is true of inner darkness. As long as we reject it, we remain on the surface. But if we dare to enter, we discover that within it lies the beginning of new strength. Try to hear the silence of night. Within its depth there is a special music, a faint rhythm that resembles the breath of the world. This rhythm itself is proof that darkness is not empty. It holds within it the pulse that prepares to become light. In myths across cultures we find similar symbols. Egyptian priests said that the sun god each night descends into the underworld to be born again at dawn. In Indian philosophy, darkness was seen as yoni, the womb where light ripens. Even in Christian mysticism, the night of the soul was described not as an end, but as purification, after which revelation comes. Thus, darkness becomes not a threat, but a threshold. It is the gate through which the journey to light begins. And if one looks closely at this image, it becomes clear. Emptiness and shadow are not the negation of being, but its deepest source. Many spiritual teachings have claimed what we call reality may only be appearance. The world of forms and objects is like a dream in which consciousness plays with itself. Things seem solid and unchanging, yet at the core, everything consists of oscillations, vibrations, and ceaseless movement. Then the distinction between emptiness and existence becomes a matter of perception. Allow yourself to notice. Indian philosophy calls this deception Maya, the veil that hides truth. Maya does not destroy reality, but makes it like a stage play. We see roles and costumes, forgetting that behind them stands the same source. In Buddhist texts, it is said, "Forms are like bubbles on the surface of the ocean. They appear, shimmer, and vanish, yet the water remains." Modern science unexpectedly echoes this idea. Physicists claim that solid matter is essentially emptiness, and particles are vibrations of energy. What we call substance is only the play of fields and waves, and thus the very boundary between is and is not begins to dissolve. Imagine. A dream feels real while we are in it. We cry, rejoice, fear, and believe it to be truth. Yet upon awakening, we realize it was illusion. In the same way, life itself can be seen as a dream we share until awakening arrives. This idea does not deny the value of the world. On the contrary, it deepens it. If reality is like a dream, then it carries hidden meaning. Dreams reveal to us what we do not always notice in waking life. So too here, illusion teaches us to discern, to seek truth, to awaken. Mystical practices say, the task is not to destroy illusion, but to see it as illusion. When we realize that forms are like shadows on a wall, we stop clinging to them. And then, even the question, why does the world exist rather than emptiness, sounds different. For what we call world may be the reflection of consciousness, and emptiness its hidden foundation. Thus reality is no longer something solid, but a process, a dream, a play. In this vision, emptiness ceases to be the enemy of being. It becomes the screen upon which the infinite dance of images unfolds. Behind all images, theories, and myths, there has always remained one thread, the sense of a source that cannot be named in words. It can neither be called emptiness nor form. It belongs neither to the world of things nor to the world of ideas. Yet it is precisely what allows existence to unfold. Allow yourself to notice. This presence does not depend on what we think or believe. It stretches across centuries and traditions like a quiet light that cannot be extinguished. Some called it the Absolute, others the Tao, still others the Source. But however it was described, at the core it was always about one thing, a foundation beyond time. Picture an ocean. Waves rise and disappear, yet the water remains. So too here. Worlds may appear and vanish, forms shift, stars ignite and fade, but presence does not waver. It is the background upon which everything plays out, and at the same time the breath that makes every moment possible. Philosophers said, being is. Mystics added, and it is always here. The inner experience of meditation shows this is not an idea, but a fact that can be felt. Stop the flow of thought for a moment, and there emerges the clear sense that life already is, regardless of how we explain it. Try to hear the silence that remains after all words. In this silence there are no divisions. It does not say this is or this is not. It simply is. This is what is called eternal presence, that which cannot be destroyed, for it was never created. This presence is not opposed to emptiness. It does not argue with it or deny it. It is deeper. It shows that emptiness itself is but one face of this source. Thus, dualism dissolves. Is and is not become two sides of one reality. And then the central question. Why does the world exist rather than emptiness? Shifts in shape. It turns into realization. The world exists because the source never ceased. Eternal presence is always here, expressing itself in countless forms, in breath, in movement, in the very fact that we can listen to this story. Everything we have explored, myths, religious revelations, philosophical reflections, meditative practices, points to one and the same truth. The answer cannot be found only in the outer world. It is born in the very heart of a human being. The spark that burns within is the reflection of that same source we have spoken about. Allow yourself to notice. When we gaze into emptiness outside, we see only darkness. But once the gaze turns inward, we discover a space that is never empty. There is always breath, always the feeling of life, always the pulse. This inner fullness is the sign that nothingness never reigns completely. This spark does not resemble a candle flame or a lightning bolt. It is soft and quiet. It reveals itself as a sudden sense of clarity, as a moment of inner recognition when it becomes clear. The world exists not because gods or laws decided so, but because the ground of being is alive within each of us. Mystics called it the divine spark, philosophers the inner reason, esoteric traditions the light of consciousness. But words only point the way. The essence remains unchanged. In every breath we already find the answer. Existence cannot be separated from the one who experiences it. Try to hear your own heart. Its rhythm is the ancient echo of the universe. It reminds us, being and emptiness are not enemies. They are two sides of one movement. Outer emptiness helps us hear inner fullness more clearly. An inner light illuminates outer darkness, turning it into space for unfolding. In this silence arises a simple realization. The question, why does the world exist rather than emptiness, no longer needs an answer in the usual sense. It becomes an invitation to experience. When we see that emptiness is filled with life and that the world is its reflection, the riddle dissolves. It turns into breath, into presence, into the immediate fact of being. Allow yourself to notice. Everything we need is already within. The spark has always burned and always will. We may forget it, but we cannot destroy it. It does not depend on faith or knowledge. It simply is. And in moments of silence, when the world feels unbearable or meaningless, it is this spark that brings us back to the source. Here lies the final turn. The answer is not hidden in distant heavens or complex theories. It rests in every breath, every moment of attention, every step we take. The spark within says, nothingness was never empty. It has always been full of life, and we are its living expression. And thus the story comes full circle. Emptiness and world are inseparable. Their union gives rise to eternal presence, which we carry within. The answer is no longer a mystery. It becomes an experience felt in every breath. And so our journey comes to an end. We have traveled from the eternal question to myths, from religious revelations to philosophical paradoxes, from meditation to the mystery of the spark within. All along, we sought the answer. Why does the world exist, and not emptiness? Now it becomes clear. The question itself is not a riddle to be solved, but a doorway leading inward. In each breath, in each pause, in every moment of presence, we find the hint that emptiness is never empty. It is always filled with the hidden source that unfolds within us. The world exists because life itself is an endless act of manifestation. And this act continues right now, in your breath, in your attention, in the very possibility of listening to these words. Allow yourself to hear this not with the mind, but with the heart. Emptiness and being are not opposed, they are one. Their union creates the eternal presence that cannot be destroyed. And if only for a moment you touch this silence, the question no longer weighs heavily. It becomes a living experience of realization. Thank you, dear listeners, for walking this path with me. Your attention and openness are part of the very spark we have spoken about. May these words serve as a reminder that the answer is always closer than it seems, in the heart, in the breath, in simple presence.